Gabriella, you're shaking your head, but as President Nixon so skillfully explained long after he resigned from office following the collapse of the Soviet Union, we, the West, have a critical duty to ensure the success of Russia's newfound freedoms and democracy. But guess what? If we misplay this collapse and freedom and prosperity doesn't take hold in Russia, there will be little possibility to use the collapse of communism in Russia to encourage change in China. And this could produce a new type of despotism, exactly what we're witnessing today, Gabrielle.
Russia, unfortunately, has not transitioned into a free and prosperous society, despite what some proponents of Russia will tell you. Russia is what many experts bill as a neo-Soviet state. It has a hybrid of fascism and tinges longing back for the old Soviet days. And the people there, you see a lot of protests starting to build up. And people in Russia maybe are finally realizing a turning point, and maybe realizing that having Vladimir Putin as the premier in charge of Russia is not going well for them. Maybe they are finally eager for change, and that's, you know, optimism there. But Russia has long settled for Putin. It's very hard to speak out against his regime. There's no free speech. With the mobilization news of 300,000 individuals, that is making a lot of Russians wanting to flee more west to Turkey, to Armenia, and they can't get into formerly occupied countries, now independent countries like the Baltics, Poland, Finland, because they are very skeptical of some of the people coming in. But Russians are fleeing actively from Russia because of this news, of this conscription news. And perhaps if this doesn't propel Vladimir Putin to change course and to tone down his aggression in Ukraine and elsewhere, perhaps maybe the citizens of Russia will finally call to an end for his regime. But that remains to be seen, because he still maintains an iron grip in the country.
And welcome back. And again, thank you so much for joining us for this Saturday, September 24th edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. We turn our attention now to China, Taiwan. The Chinese began a military exercise to blockade Taiwan immediately after Speaker Pelosi departed Taiwan. The logistics and forces deployed for the exercise remain in place. Slowly, the economic squeeze is increasing. China can maintain the Taiwan exercise in place for years, believe it or not, as they need or want to. It chokes off exports and imports. Taiwan, as an island, is severely vulnerable to this type of slowly increasing, and we call it economic warfare. It's a war on their population at large, and the United States does not have the naval forces to deal with the Taiwan issue. Gabrielle?
He does have a point about President Biden potentially being compromised, but more so to his speech that he delivered at the UN, where he walked back his comments saying that the United States will defend Taiwan in any event of attack. Then he affirmed in his UN speech that we're more so adhering to strategic ambiguity, we support the one China policy, and that doesn't give any confidence to Taiwanese who are looking to the U.S. for leadership. And Biden's inclinations here point to that he doesn't view the U.S. as a superpower, that we must be side by side with China, the new superpower, in his opinion, giving concession to them. We're not leading on the stage if he's making these conflicting statements. That leaves me worried. And if you claim to be in support of Ukraine's territorial ambitions to be autonomous and to be free, you have to also extend that same consideration for Taiwan.
So you don't think that was a cognitive moment for him? You actually think that is a part of what their real policy has been about in the past and moving forward?
Yeah, they adhere to a philosophy of strategic ambiguity. That's why they put out these conflicting statements. They put out, again, hearkening to the one China policy. We don't believe Taiwan is an independent state, so as to not anger China. And that could raise a lot of concerns about why that is the case, whether it's his potential or his alleged business interests in the past there, or he doesn't want to anger China, or he wants the U.S. to take a step back and China to assert itself on the global stage. A lot of conflicting evidence, and as the previous guest just said, it puts into question, is he really putting America's interests at play? Is he really adhering to advancing freedom, to supporting our allies who are facing aggression from either China or Russia? And that puts a lot into question about where he stands.
You know, Gabrielle, we're still paying a huge price for how we left Afghanistan in the faces of world leaders, our credibility, our trustworthiness. It continues to reverberate.
It certainly does, and we see that the impact from that terrible fallout from our withdrawal from Afghanistan had consequences in local elections here in the D.C. metro area. Republicans swept in Virginia as a result of that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. So it does have impact here at home and also abroad too. But going to Iran, this administration, the Biden administration, gave permission to one of their leaders to come here for the UN conference, all the while domestically backing Iran. There are protests in response to a 22-year-old woman who defied the morality laws, and she was murdered essentially for that, persecuted and then immediately murdered. You have women across the country of Iran, and the Biden administration is still sitting at the table negotiating this Iran deal when they should be completely out of that negotiating table. They shouldn't be partaking in any negotiations, and Russia's helping to lead negotiations, interestingly enough. So we are inconsistent in our application of dealing with Russia. We oppose Russia in one area, but not consistently in the negotiations there. But all these state actors, enemies of the United States, are now emboldened, unfortunately, under this administration. We see China more emboldened, we see Iran more emboldened, and Russia more emboldened, and we see people in these respective countries similarly suffering because we're not tough, we're not showing that we're the leader of the free world. And that's why we're seeing a lot of kind of discord happening too, but we shouldn't be emboldening actors like Iran whatsoever.
I definitely want you to remember all the important points that have been made about our foreign policy today. And yes, you did not misunderstand what Sam Faddis said when he said that China is colonizing Africa before our very eyes, and their leadership are most aware of it. Yes, colonizing. Well, let's turn domestically, because the most pressing issue is the southern border, Sam. The truth is starting to spill out on how many terrorist watch list people have been caught coming in the tidal wave of humans crossing illegally. But the terrifying number is the gotaways. That's right. Truth be told, hundreds of fighting-age male terrorists from multiple nations have slipped into the country unnoticed. We could very well see squad-size operations begin in America that will bring a new level of horror. Nothing can even imagine what happened on 9/11 down on the continental United States. Gabrielle, I mean, it's just crazy that our borders are so porous, and yet Biden and his vice president says it's under control.
Yes, they're in denial about the situation at the southern border. It's very problematic. You see people coming here under false pretenses. A lot of these people are migrants. I don't know if you could say that they're refugees, because a lot of people are saying they're refugees, they're fleeing for better situations, but they forego going through the proper channels to come here to this country. I'm a daughter of refugees, so I'm a little familiar with that there, and a lot of people are very concerned that a lot of these migrants are coming in under false pretenses, they are human trafficked, and when reporters, there's one reporter in particular that's irritated the White House, according to different reports. Fox News's Bill Malugin has been told that his coverage of the southern border, which is fair and balanced, he's covering the human trafficking aspect, the fentanyl aspect, the migrant overload aspect, and the White House refuses to go there. They refuse to do their job in enforcing the border. And they're attacking reporters who are actually there on the ground, seeing what is happening in real time, and highlighting the dangers there. They're in denial. They refuse to go to the border. And if they continue to plead ignorance here and to downplay the situation, it's going to hit them hard, severely, and it's going to make everyone worse off. And I think we'll talk more about the alleged stunts of the Republican governors. The Republican governors, for all intents and purposes, are trying to showcase that every state can be a border town, and that this is a real crisis. And people in Martha's Vineyard kind of shrugged off the influx of migrants and wanted Cape Cod to take care of them and the National Guard. But if that doesn't wake them up to the reality of what happens at the border, I don't know what else will. And so that's a lesson that they have to learn. And if they don't learn their lesson, Republicans are going to school them accordingly.
Gabrielle?
I would have to agree with Charles. I think this administration, all across the board domestically, when you look at our energy policy, the policies that they've put into effect that largely prioritize climate change are to the benefit of China and Russia. We can't domestically drill here for oil and gas, but other countries can. It's a completely hypocritical approach to policy, and similarly with the border. I think they have this notion that this influx of migrants is going to be a future voting bloc, and I think that's really insincere and really degrading to those who are immigrants, descendants of immigrants who've come here. And I don't think those people, if they truly knew how they're being exploited by this administration, would like that. If they learned that, that's what largely they're doing here. But domestically, internationally, we're in a weaker position in America.
Oh, you caught me wrapping up, and it is a wrap. That's what happens here. We got to get out of here, baby. But look, the most outstanding conversation on foreign policy that you can imagine. Share it with your friends. I'm Armstrong Williams. Thank you all.